Good morning, everyone. Trust that you're hearing me clearly. Welcome to our EPOC press briefing or quarterly press briefing. My name is Althea Walters. I'll be facilitating today. And as usual, we have our chair, Mr. Keith Duncan, who will be bringing us a presentation on the performance of the GOJ initiatives and economic performance. So we do have a number of persons online. I want to welcome everybody, as well as we do have persons in the room. And online, we have representatives from our EPOC committee. We have Mr. Richard Lumsden, who is here. We also have Mr. Donovan Wignall. And along with him, he brought a team. So there are a number of persons who are on, who is from the MSME Alliance, including Michelle Tulloh and some more representatives that Donovan wanted to make sure is a part of the session. We have the JIS, who is also online. We have TVJ, we have IRI FM, we have Nationwide, we have Jamaica Observer, and in the room, we also have our Today. Yeah. We have Jamaica Observer. We also have representative from the MOF. So welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being early. And also we have our support team as usual, our support team from Procom, from Agtelligent, and we just want to make everybody welcome. Now, today, Mr. Duncan will be leading us, and I will be handing over to him as he goes into his presentation.
Thank you very much, Althea, and good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming out today, and for those who are here with us, the usual crew, and Keith, thank you very much. So we can do a rigorous review of the economic performance of the government of Jamaica in April 2024. And also to those online, thank you for attending. You know, we will, of course, we want to have, you know, incisive discussions around where we are and how we see Jamaica going forward. And we welcome the dialogue. All right. So I begin by, you know, the Economic Program Oversight Committee met on September 2nd, and we reviewed the, you know, the overall economic, GOJ economic reform program with a focus around the quantification of fiscal, monetary, and to get a good sense of where we are at this point in time as a country. And we're just going to speak to a few highlights. Well, firstly, and we're happy to say that the IMF program was successfully completed, and the IMF came in on August 13th or 30th, and they issued a release on August 30th about the success of the program under the precautionary liquidity line and the resilient sustainability facility, right? And that is excellent. However, what we saw also, we saw GDP growing from PIOJ estimates in the first quarter of the financial year, of the fiscal year. However, to get into more details, revenues and grants for April to July outperformed budget, while expenditures were within budget. Inflation is firmly anchored now within the range of 4 to 6% at 5.1% for July 2024. So it remains within the DOJ's target range and GOJ's target range, which is actually set by the GOJ. BOJ lowered its policy rate finally to 6.75%, marking the first reduction since August 2019. That's August 2019 when it started increasing interest rates. So this is the first reduction since August 2019. Our net international reserves are more than adequate at 5.1 billion at the end July 2024. All the targets and structural benchmarks, qualitative targets and structural benchmarks for the third review under the precautionary liquidity line and the resilience sustainability facility were met. So let's get into some further detail. And we look at the total revenues and grants being at $301 billion. $301 billion for April to July 2024, outperforming budget by $12.9 billion. Tax revenues being at 270.8 billion and non-tax revenues at 27.5 billion. Tax revenues actually surpassed budget by 3.7 billion or 1.4% for the review period. This was primarily due to stronger than expected total income and profits, which was 5.5 billion higher than budget. You recall that at the end of March, the income and profits were below budget as corporate income taxes were lower than targeted at the end of March. There was some discussion around timing. However, as we see at this point in time, that the income and profits was 5.5 billion higher than budget. This was tempered by lower than projected receipts from production and consumption and international trade. Notably, travel tax with inflow was of 9.5 billion or 2.1 billion behind target, reflecting slower than projected visitor arrivals. This was, however, positively impacted, that is non-tax revenue, positively impacted by the drawdown of the government of Jamaica insurance policies with the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility. So non-tax revenue exceeded the budget by $7 billion due to the drawdowns on trade. Expenditures were marginally behind budget at 336 billion, 6.2 billion behind budget, but actually 37.1 billion higher than the total spending for April to July 2022. Right? There was lower than projected spending in the recurrent budget. Total recurrent spending was for April to July was 32.4 billion, and this was due to higher program spending and increased wage bill consequent on the public sector compensation restructure. Right? So it was $32.4 billion higher than the same period last year. Expenditures on wages and salaries amounted to 139.3 billion aligned with the budget, but representing a $6.4 billion increase over the same period in July 2020. Interest costs at 56 billion were in line with budget. What is important, and these are the fiscal balances which actually drive our debt reduction strategy, and which is our fiscal rule around a balanced budget. There's a fiscal deficit of $34.3 billion compared to a budgeted deficit of $53.4 billion. This deficit, however, was higher than the $18.4 billion deficit recorded in April to July 2023, but it's within budget. The primary surplus was 21.7 billion over the review period. This exceeded the budget surplus of 2.3 billion, but it was 12.9 billion lower than the surplus reported for the same period last year. Notable fiscal developments. When we look at and there's a table in the communique, I believe, that speaks to the GOJ's disaster risk financing strategy following the passage of Hurricane Beryl. And we look at the contingencies fund and the National Disaster Fund. The amount there was 4.5 billion, and this is to be drawn down. The tropical cyclone policy, 16.6 million US dollars, equivalent of 2.6 billion Jamaican dollars, that was drawn down. The excess rainfall policy of 10.3 million US dollars, equivalent of 1.6 billion, was already drawn down. So therefore, that's somewhere 4.2 of $8.7 billion was drawn down from the National Disaster Risk Financing Strategy and the policies that we have in place. What Jamaica has also available to it is an IDG credit contingent claim of US 385 million. The World Bank Catastrophe Bond of 150 million, and there's also the IMF precautionary liquidity line of 963 million US dollars, which is available to Jamaica up until March 2025. We do expect that we will have supplementary estimates somewhere between September and October. We know that we expect the interim fiscal policy paper, which is due in September, to be produced in short order. The supplementary estimates will have to incorporate the fiscal impact of Hurricane Beryl, The revenue measures which were announced by the Minister of Finance in his budget presentation, and the other emerging factors that may influence Jamaica's fiscal outlook. Securitization of receivables. This was a big component of the budget, and that was for 45 billion to fund the capital expenditure associated with the SPARK program, as well as the fiscal measures that were tabled in the 2024-25 budget. Work is ongoing in this area, and it's expected that details will be shared with the public in short order. The Fiscal Commission is expected to commence operation in calendar year 2024-2025. So early in next year, you will see the Fiscal Commission up and running. Let's go to the monetary now. As we said, inflation came in July 2024 at 5.1%, and this is the fifth consecutive month that inflation has remained within the bank's 4 to 6% target range. This continued downward trend is attributed to a fall in agricultural prices, lower international commodity prices, and a generally stable exchange rate. Core inflation was at 4.7% at July 2024. So both indicators are firmly within the GOJ target range for inflation. As a consequence, BOJ has reduced its policy rate by 25 basis points, 6.75%. The BOJ Monetary Policy Committee announced its decision to reduce the monetary policy rate from 7%, where it has remained unchanged since November of 2022. And that was effective on August 20th, 2024. The monetary policy concluded that inflation is becoming more anchored in the bank's target rate of 46%, and reflects its assessment that the prevailing economic environment is conducive to further cautious easing of its monetary policy stance. Jamaica's gross international reserves are at 5.145 million US as at in July 2024, and that is at 121.1% of the assessing reserve adequacy metrics for 2024-25, which would have had the gross international reserves at 4.25 billion US dollars. So Jamaica reserves are ample. We have buffers, and we're in a good place. The NIR stood at $5 billion US dollars at in July 2024. So, very favorable position for Jamaica to be in terms of our international reserves. The foreign exchange market has remained fairly stable since the start of the year, traded at around in August at 158.09 cents back to the US dollar. And there was a depreciation of 1.04% compared to in June 2024, and a year-over-year depreciation of 1.64% against the US dollar. There was an increase in the depreciation rate for July to August 2024 relative to the same months in 2023. To support exchange rate stability, the Bank of Jamaica conducted timely market interventions, selling $466 million into the market, and in that period, this was closely aligned with the $463 million sold during the same period in 2023. Remittances continue to be healthy and robust, at $1 billion between April to July 2024. The BOJ expects remittances to normalize in this range over the medium term. Visitor arrivals, which are where we are seeing some action here, declined year over year for Q1 2024-2025. For the June 2024 quarter, Jamaica welcomed 759 tourists, reflecting an annual decline of 0.8% relative to the growth for 11% for June 2024. Right, so what we're seeing is maybe the end of the COVID bounce, and also preliminary data indicated that for the month of July 2024, a total of 245,864 visited Jamaica, a decline of 10% relative to July 2023. The U.S. travel advisory issued in January 30th, 2024 may have impacted visitor arrivals. when we look at the private credit and the growth in private credit and new loans disbursed through the deposit-taking institutions, this is where we see new loans disbursed between April and June 2024 being at 185.6 billion. And April down 4 billion over the 189.7 which were issued for the same period last year. Right. So we're seeing a flattening or even a reduction in new loans disbursed. This reduction stems from a 17.9% decline in credit for businesses across all productive sectors, except agriculture, and demonstrates the impact of a tight monetary policy, which has been implemented by the Bank of Jamaica for the past few years. However, this was partially offset by a $13.8 billion increase in credit to individuals. So just doing a quick review of the IMF, the completion of the IMF program. On August 30th, the IMF Executive Board concluded its third and final reviews under the Jamaica's precautionary liquidity line and resilience and sustainability facility. And we were successful. The PL continues to be treated as precautionary, and the completion of the reviews allow for an immediate disbursement of $980 million under the PLL and US $258 million under the RSF, which was drawn which was drawn by the BOJ by September 2024. So we have drawn down that US $258 million. All structural benchmarks were achieved, and the BOJ exceeded the indicative target for net international reserves. A target that was marginally missed or narrowly missed due to a smaller than expected surplus at March 31st, 2024, had a negative impact on the debt consolidation plan. So therefore, the IMF signed off, and this IMF program is now complete. And therefore, what we do have the precautionary liquidity line of US $980 million, which remain in place until March 2025. We will see that labor markets, the unemployment rate remains low at 5.4%. But people may wonder what the unemployment was at 4.2%. But there has been an updated definition by the ILO, International Labour Organization, and they have changed the definition to the definitions of unemployment, etc. The labor indicators. So work is now narrowly defined as work performed for pay or profit, and update to the age limit, which was raised from 14 to 15, and a change in the definition of those classified as unemployed. So when we compare, and there's a table here which shows in October 2023, when and it's in the communique also, when the labor force was at 1.377,600,000, and at October 23, when under the previous definition, and the labor force has increased to 1.486. 1.486 million under the new definition. The employed have moved from 1.324 million to 1.405 million, and the unemployed have moved from 57,300 to 80,700. So the new definition actually increases the labor force, right, and increases the employed, but also the unemployed, right? There's if you want further detail, we can provide that. All right, or that's available through stacking. So when we look at the economy now, and this is where we have some concern, real GDP was relatively flat at 0.1% for the April to June 2024 quarter, right? And this at 0.1%. And bearing in mind that the government of Jamaica budgeted assumptions are based on a growth of 1.8% in real GDP for the fiscal year. Okay, and and this is prior to burial. Okay, so therefore GDP came in flat at 0.1% in that quarter. And there was also a flat upturn in the hotel and restaurant industry, right, a key driver of Jamaica's growth post-COVID. So we see tourism flattening out also. Construction continues to decline. The mining and quarrying industry has normalized. Agriculture with a growth rate of 2.7% continues to perform. But remember, this is prior to very. So therefore, agriculture is expected to have a significant decline based on the impact of the sector with very. So when we look at the projections, so the projections of the Planning Institute of Jamaica and the Bank of Jamaica, they have ratcheted down their forecast for the growth of the economy for 2024, 2025, right? So the PIOJ's forecast is for lower than budgeted growth of 1.8% by the BOJ. So they have lowered their projections from 1% to negative 1%. So they have their estimates for growth are between -1% and 1%. That is the Planning Institute of Jamaica. And that's largely dependent where it falls within that range on the pace of recovery from the effects of Hurricane Barry. Right? The BOJ's forecast, they are forecasting for real GDP in the range of negative for 2024 to 2025, for fiscal year, of -1% to 0.5% for 2024 to 2025, driven by the contraction, agriculture, forestry and fishing, and construction. Right? For 2025-26, the BOJ is projecting a growth range of 1.5 to 3.5%. Right? This is reflecting a rebound from the adverse effects of Hurricane Beryl, and then we expect that Jamaica will settle into its long-term growth rate of 1.2%. Our outlook going forward, the outlook going forward as Jamaica's growth projections have been reduced from 1.8% to, as we just discussed, lower projections for growth in 2024-25, that we see that will have impact on the fiscal, monetary, and policies of the government of Jamaica and Bank of Jamaica. However, globally, what we see is despite relatively high interest rates globally, growth remains resilient, holding steady at a projected 3.2% global growth, that is for 2024, and 3.3% for 2025. It is expected that central banks globally will continue to ease monetary policy in the short term, driven by incoming data. So we expect the Federal Reserve will reduce interest rates. There's speculation that it could be between 25 and 50 basis points at their September sitting. There's speculation that it could be 100 basis points by the end of December 2024. But that is all up to the Fed and the data, and all of these monetary policy actions are driven by data. We expect that the Bank of Jamaica will continue their easy monetary policy. They have started easy monetary policy. We expect that BOJ will continue to ease monetary policy, and we expect further reduction in interest rates from the Bank of Jamaica. So we have observed that there's a downward trend in inflation. It's within the range for the past 5 months, and this demonstrates the effectiveness of BOJ's monetary policy actions in recent years. So inflation has been targeted. Inflation is within the range where they were able to drive up domestic demand, and they'll be able to slow growth, the monetary policy, right? This is consistent with the Bank of Jamaica's objective. Remember, drive slow domestic demand, and this has also impacted the growth in loans to businesses and reduced economic activity, as reflected in the GDP Q1 projection of a flat 0.1%. So EPOC believes that the Bank of Jamaica needs to look at balancing inflation and growth. The Bank of Jamaica is quite focused on inflation targeting, but we believe that the BOJ's mandate could possibly take into consideration balancing inflation targeting with the growth dynamics of the economy, especially given that Jamaica has little margin for erosion of growth as the economy normalizes its long-term growth rate of 1 to 2%. Looking ahead, the risk to the domestic GDP forecasts are skewed to the downside over the short to medium term, and this depends on the pace of easing of monetary policy, including the pace and quantum of reduction of interest rates, domestic and external demand, also the risk of weather-related shocks. However, on the upside, if the estimated impact of Hurricane Beryl is overestimated and or the recovery from the hurricane is faster than forecasted, Jamaica could see upward adjustments to GDP. Fiscal risk, and we do have no tax revenues at risk because tax revenues are based on economic activity, and what we're seeing is a slowdown in economic activity and the GDP growth rate, which was targeted at 1.8% inside of the fiscal policy paper, and its assumption driving the budget and the forecasted revenues that GDP growth is actually lower than projected, and that will have an impact on economic activity and tax revenue, right? As we discussed earlier. EPOC, so therefore we do expect with the estimated reduction in economic activities, tax revenues are highly likely to be negatively impacted, right? There is one area that we have to point to, which is the growth in public sector wages and salaries, which are very concerning, and Jamaica needs to contemplate the reintroduction of the wages and salaries fiscal rule, right? As GDP moderates and slows, wages and salaries, which were projected to be at 12.6% of GDP, would increase as GDP slows. With wages and salaries being already high and consuming at 44% of total tax revenues, Jamaica could continue to see this ratio in relation to revenue moving higher as economic activity slows along the growth of tax revenue. These ratios are extremely worrisome as wages and salaries reduce fiscal flexibility, and if not controlled, could crowd out other areas of expenditure, including growth enhancing capital expenditure, services to the Jamaican public, including the social safety net which supports the budget. As the GOJ as the GOJ completes outstanding negotiations with sections of the public sector and goes into a new round of wage negotiations in the upcoming 2025-26 fiscal year, it is important that growth in wages and salaries be kept lower or in line with growth in GDP to ensure that productivity levels are increased or maintained. What we saw was a public sector compensation restructuring. What we really need to see is a public sector transformation to get increased productivity from our public sector. So, as I said before, Jamaica needs to contemplate the reintroduction of the wages and salaries fiscal rule, or at least to have a healthy debate around where do we want to see public sector wages and salaries in relationship to GDP. The 9% wages to GDP ratio was removed in April 2023 when the Financial Administration and Audit Act was amended. This ratio is expected to be in the 12 to 13% range over the medium term. This elevated level of wage to GDP ratio is of concern and brings along with it, as I said, the risk of fiscal flexibility. EPOC is therefore of the view that the GOJ needs to look at capping the wages to GDP ratio once again by reintroducing the wages to GDP fiscal rule. And the same disciplined approach to debt reduction should be pursued to bring this ratio back in line with the target defined in this fiscal rule. So, as a result of all these considerations, EPOC is very cautious in its outlook for the Jamaican economy as a marked slowing of the economy compounded by Hurricane Beryl. This slowdown in the economy brings along with it the attendant risk of lower than budgeted growth in tax revenues, along with increased expenditures in public sector wages and salaries, currently consuming an oversized share of GDP and tax revenue. The fiscal risk will enlarge. Achieving the fiscal balance targets and the debt reduction strategies will become challenging and require significant political will to maintain Jamaica's impressive fiscal performance. EPOC strongly encourages the GOJ and the BOJ to optimize the fiscal and monetary policy mix, which may require some fiscal adjustments accompanied by more aggressive easing of monetary policy and interest rate reductions in order to maintain macro fiscal stability and to proactively move Jamaica back into the medium-term growth range of 1–2%. Thank you very much, everyone. That was a presentation, and we can open it up. We also have Mr. Donovan Wingnut online, and I know he will have some points and something like that. Donovan is a member of the EPOC. And we also have Carrie Ann from the Bank of Jamaica online, just in case we have that kind of question. So over to you, Ms. Althea, to facilitate.
Thank you very much, Mr. Duncan, for your presentation. We are now inviting questions. In the meantime, I'm asking persons online to post the questions in the chat. We will take them there. And yes, Mr. Powell, we will be sending out information to the team. You were asking if the slides will be, if they're finished. Yes, we will be sending out information. So if you are not on our email listing, we ask you to also drop your email in the chat in the meantime. So questions, we have a question from in-house. We will take that first, and go ahead, Mr. Edwards.
Is it, do you foresee the Bank of Jamaica lowering its monetary policy rate further this year? Do you see another goal again, 25 basis points? And do you see perhaps another 25 basis points, or do you think they're going to be brave enough to go to 50 basis?
The Bank of Jamaica has always been very conservative, and they are very data dependent. And you know, we have the impact of Brexit. What we're going to see is a spike in inflation, and they're projected for that to December. But they have said that that will be transitionary. And the Bank of Jamaica has indicated that they believe that inflation is actually returning. We are hopeful that as we see central banks across the world move, that the Bank of Jamaica, who moved ahead of the Fed in tightening monetary policy, that they will move ahead of the Fed in loosening monetary policy, and we would hope that they would probably go for a higher rate of reduction in interest rates. So we hope for 50 basis points. And this I think is dependent on where the U.S. Federal Reserve goes, because there's always, we have to manage the differential between where U.S. interest rates are and where Jamaican interest rates are. And I think Bank of Jamaica is going to watch that spread between where the Fed is, because the Fed is at between 5.25 and 5.5 now. Jamaica is at 6.25. So if the Fed was to move 25 basis points, maybe the BOJ move another 25 basis points. If the Fed move 50 basis points, maybe the BOJ will move 50 basis points. But that is all data dependent. We're hoping, because the economy is in a slow even before burial, right? And we are probably asking the Bank of Jamaica to look very carefully and maybe more aggressively reducing interest rates, and maybe to that 50 basis points, and send a signal to the economy that that monetary policy, the shift is now baked in, and we're moving in a very proactive manner to get the economy back on track.
All right, thank you, Mr. Duncan. We will go to Javon from TVG, and then we come back to Keith. Okay, Mr. Collins.
Yeah, that's a jigger thing. That's a nice you like that. A jigger thing.
I do.
Yes, sir.
When last interest rates have fallen before COVID, the differential between the Jamaican and US interest rates was only 1%. So
Right.
why do you think that the VA and how that policy so closely to the US Fed president when it seems as though the market, the asking them opinion on this is quite segmented in terms of the US dollar. Which you think that is not, but I think that there is partially.
Good, very, very good question.
Let's have a step forward. They didn't hear the question, so we're gonna ask if we can repeat the question.
Please, go ahead.
Yes.
No, the question is, prior to, the monetary policy action before COVID, the spread, the Bank of Jamaica, the Fed, there was a spread of 25 basis point, 0.25% between where the US Federal Reserve rate was and where Jamaica was. So Fed was at probably at 0.25%, and Jamaica interest rate was 0.5%. So, and I just shared a while ago that the Bank of Jamaica watches the spread between the Fed rate and our Jamaican policy rate, and they have indicated so in the past, right? No, so, that's a very good question, Keith. So why wouldn't the Bank of Jamaica allow for that rate to come back into line where it was prior to COVID? And that's a very good question, and we actually do have a lot more reserves in place, in our we have $5 million and gross international reserves meeting far exceeding the requirements. So therefore, we do have room, and if there is absolutely no reason why the Bank of Jamaica couldn't get back there if they are aggressive with monetary policy using that to keep us at very good point because there was some exchange there was exchange rate stability in the period. We do have a flexible exchange rate, and so that's a very good point. And the Bank of Jamaica, in light of where they were before, where they were comfortable with a 25 basis points there's no reason why they couldn't be more aggressive in reducing interest rates and bringing down that spread back in line. So it's very likely. And they do have their reserves to be able to maintain their things to do.
Well, speaking of exchange rate stability, for the last month and a half or so, you've seen at least 3 instances where the dollar has hit a new record low compared to the US dollar. Then I mean, we have global soon, but many people still don't get that. They tie the movement of the US dollar to cost of living, and rightly so. As government more than 60% of what we use is imports. I mean, what does EPOC have to say to Jamaica as it relates to those movements? And we have anything to say to the Georgia as it relates to how they do keep their analogy and the products?
Well, when we look at the actual depreciation year over year is 1.6%. We do expect that there will be depreciation will and when we say exchange rate stability, I don't think that we believe that exchange rate is going to remain fixed. A fixed exchange rate is different from a stable exchange rate. And a stable exchange rate, we expect that the exchange rate will remain in a band, and also it is expected that when we see the volatility that the Bank of Jamaica, Bank of Jamaica sees volatility, that it will intervene in the market and sell US dollars into the market. Of course, you will get spurts sometimes because as we go say into the Christmas season, what you probably see is people, businesses that are purchasing US dollars to buy up their goods and services for Christmas sales, etc. There's always the seasonality of exchange rates of the exchange rate movement. But the Bank of Jamaica does have the reserves, and Jamaicans should be very confident that we have the resources to defend the exchange rate, that we have the tools, the monetary policy tools to defend the exchange rate and keep it in a stable range. So, we just, you have, in order to be able to maintain a functioning and efficient market, right? And for there to be, a market where people can buy US dollars and buy foreign currency freely, you have to maintain a market that allows for movement, right? There are other countries right here in our region that don't have that have a fixed exchange rate, and you cannot get foreign currency to buy. They have rules around how you acquire and limits around what you can acquire, and Jamaica does not want to be that place. So we have to be able to allow for exchange rates to be allow for free flowing market. But what we would like to see is that exchange rate is kept stable, as the Bank of Jamaica has indicated that they will continue to be.
All right, thank you very much.
Keith, it's a little bit disturbing to see tourism decline. I don't think that's just attributable to the virus. What do you see there? Why the fall off?
Well, I can only speculate here.
Yeah.
But my thing is, upcoming presidential elections, the COVID and the source market were 70% of our revenues to the US. And so therefore you have a really noisy market in the US, right? Also, there is the post-COVID bounce is over. And in that COVID bounce, what you could have seen is pent-up travel demand. And therefore many more people are traveling. Maybe you see that the arrivals normalizing now in terms of because of that pent-up demand. And you could have seen many people traveling that would not have normally traveled because they missed their vacation for the 3 years and therefore they travel. And therefore what you see is probably normalizing now, I think, right below the COVID levels. Right? And plus the US economy, in terms of the interest rates, the high and tight monetary policy interest rates, and impacted the consumer in the US also, and therefore we do expect that will have its own consequences and which could lower, risk arrivals of the US. So,
do you also see the impact to some degree of climate change? For some places, it's just as hot. So
right.
They're looking to great you can probably stay the same, whatever, or in there rather than travel.
Right. Well, that question too big for me.
Yeah.
The impact of climate change. Well, that's a possibility.
Thank you very much. Jamal, go ahead.
My question is regarding, but I have 2 questions here. I'm going to go back on to the later. This week, the governor Baz mentioned the special resolution regime not coming before Parliament. Talk to me about the importance of that kind of regulation and how we kind of hope for that to have on a local investment.
So, most countries have a effective special resolution, right? And we do need one because you have the Insolvency Act, you have all these different acts, and none of it comes together in a comprehensive way. So most developed and developing countries do have special resolution. Jamaica needs one. The devil is in the detail. And the Joint Select Committee is meeting because members of the financial sector could be concerned that there could be overreach by the Bank of Jamaica. And as they move from supervision to resolution, and therefore that is where that Joint Select Committee and consultations with the financial sector are going to be very important. But there's no question that we do need a special resolution. It has been outstanding from 2030. It became a structural benchmark under the precautionary design because we weren't getting it done. Right? But there will be lively discussions around this. Work from the financial sector, the Bank of Jamaica, what is very important that we get it going and we find the right balance.
Well, we're in your other hat for a second, so sorry, a quick follow-up. A quick follow-up, I mean, could you say to us so far based on those consultations, what are some of the major pain points?
No, but I don't want to comment on it yet because I myself am not going through the legislation. We have attorneys on the Jamaica Bankers Association, Jamaica Security Leaders Association. There are attorneys that are looking at it right now, but the concerns would be around the movement from supervision, where the Bank of Jamaica moves in and puts in a heightened level of supervision, to resolution where they can look at you and they can say, well, this is the way we see how you should go forward, and we can break, and we recommend, or we strongly, we're gonna action you breaking your entity up, right?
But some of the institutions keep promoting the fact that you've got to contend with the asset tax,
Yeah,
corporate tax. Now I heard this thing is gonna have an 11%.
right.
So it's just the degree of taxation, and there's a lot of concern from players in the sector, particularly from the large finance houses. Like, what's your take on that?
Well,
The burden of taxation.
the regulator burden has certainly been increasing,
Yeah.
and the cost of doing business has certainly been increasing. The financial sector was very generous in giving back the benefit of the asset tax to the government right when COVID impacted Jamaica. And I was the president of the PSO at the time, and we coordinated with all the insurance associations, Jamaica Bankers Association, and security dealers, and we said, in the best interest of Jamaica, the Minister of Finance had put in his budget that the asset tax would be reduced. And we said, in the best interest of Jamaica, please keep that asset tax. And once you're in a position to begin the reduction again, what we didn't do was put documents at that time level.
Which they are.
Right? And therefore, that was where we had a object. And therefore, the asset tax, is a real significant cost. Because it erodes your capital, right? It erodes your profitability, and erodes your capital, and it erodes your ability to pay dividends to shareholders, to grow your business, because it's a significant, and it's based on an asset and not on profits. And so it's a distortionary tax. And it has to be addressed at some point in time. But what you might find is other fiscal expenditures become more important than returning this asset tax, which was supposed to this distortionary asset tax, which was supposed to have been removed a long time ago. It is not politically, it's not seen as optimal optics to remove, to return the asset tax to the financial. Right? But the regulatory burden is increasing, as you said, and one has to be very careful that that impacts your service delivery. It impacts how you do business. We already know that the capital adequacy ratios are going to be increased from 10 to 12%, and then this other additional cost, which is inside of the legislation that is being discussed by the majority of the committee. So the government of Jamaica and the Bank of Jamaica need to be very careful that they don't push people to the limits and they don't push away capital. Because if you make it expensive to do business for your financial institutions, then intermediation becomes more expensive, and that is passed on to the consumer. Right? And in terms of increased lending rates and increased fees, etc. So there needs to be that balance and dialogue with the financial sector, bankers, security dealers, insurance associations, right, to ensure that we're finding the right balance between, the regulatory burden and the financial services intermediation.
Thank you very much. Still no questions online, but
I can ask one question.
Yes, sir.
Yes, related. So the capital, you said 10% at the end of the solution and going to change 12. I have so like for cities were already 12.5 at least from the rating document, right? That's good. That's one question. That's related to the whole issue of pushing away capital from where is the state of the Basel was the Basel 2 in terms of implementation?
We're moving to Basel 3.
Right, we're partway through the Basel implementation. Can you give us that context of where we are from your perspective and how that capital impacts not for example the asset tax and so on impacts that.
Right.
Is that clear?
Well, any movement in capital adequacy ratios in terms of increasing those ratios and increasing buffers, it's simply required by the central bank, makes the cost of doing business more expensive. Right, not removing the asset tax, that also, increases the cost of business because it's on assets and not on profits, right? And the fact that there is a differential in the corporate income tax rate for financial institutions. So, it's very expensive to do business as a financial sector company. And therefore, the Bank of Jamaica needs to, and also as a country, and the financial sector needs to look at how all of these different elements come together and impact the cost of capital. Right? And therefore, if your cost of capital is higher than your peer countries, and therefore your lending rates are going to be higher than your peer countries, your cost of the cost to the consumer of doing business with financial institutions is going to be higher because they invest the shareholders that buy shares in the financial institution, they want to see a return on their equity, on their shares, and they want their dividends. And if you make the cost of doing business too high and prohibitive, then you're impacting the return to shareholders, you're impacting services to the customers and financial institutions.
But not only that, it contradicts the fact that you say you want small and medium enterprises,
Right.
they need to get capital. To get the capital from the financial institutions when prohibited.
Yeah.
So really this contradiction.
Right.
Right there.
So, and that is the overall growth. How do we look at growth in Jamaica? And how are we going to ensure that we have the right mix of policies to drive growth in Jamaica? And I don't know Donovan is on the line. I don't know if Donovan is available for comment on this matter in terms of growth and impact on small and medium enterprises. Donovan, are you there?
Yes.
Yeah, yes, Chair. I am here. And very important point that you made earlier about making, the policies can't make business too expensive to operate, not just banks, but businesses in general. And one of the things that makes businesses the expense of running a business, a lot is interest rates. Now, the BOJ did reduce its interest rates by 25 basis points. But the problem I think the BOJ has is the latency with which that exists in the transmission of that reduction to the banking sector. I think there's a 6 months timeline for the effect of the reduction of the interest rates take effect in the banking sector. And I think that is way too long. I think when interest rates are increased on the BOJ side, it transmits to the banking sector a lot quicker than when it's reduced. So outside of legislation, with the BOJ doing what it does based on the economic indicators, I think the transmission system needs to be fixed, where when the BOJ reduces its interest rates, then within a shorter period of time, not 6 months, it is reflected in the banking sector so that the effects of that will take root and the sector can get cheaper financing to run their business. Productivity in the country is generally low, and productivity is directly related to the growth of the economy. So you are also correct when you said that the policies of the government, not just BOJ, has to be such that it induces growth to increase GDP, which also definitely will help the numbers economically as you will see it. So we have to address the whole matter of productivity. Productivity is low, even though we have very high employment at the moment, our productivity remains constant and it's directly related to our GDP. So a couple of things there that need some attention. And if those are addressed, I think our growth figures would look much better in the short and medium term.
Thank you, Donovan. Very important remark, because those online the where Jamaica has achieved macroeconomic and shift and stability. And what we're stabilizing the range of 2%. That is where we're projected forward, even the fiscal policy remains in the low growth range. What takes us out of this range? What takes us out of this range? Increased productivity, cost of doing business. That takes us out of this range. What we also see is the labor markets are tight. We see that 66% of our workers have no certification. Therefore, when we look at investments that we attract to Jamaica, they made a low value added jobs that were added because we don't have the skills here in Jamaica. So you're not going to find, biotech firms, and we're not going to find technology firms that are going to come to Jamaica because we don't have the skills here, right? So you'll find the low value added jobs, the more, and that because we don't have the skills, and that is the kind of industries that are going to come here. And those industries don't add significant value added and GDP growth. So we have to deal with one, education, and increase the skill sets of our economy. Our education system has to be addressed. The transformation that we want as a country for education has to be dealt with. There's no way that 33% of our children should be leaving primary school functionally illiterate. There's absolutely no way. And there's absolutely no way that 80% of those who sit the CSEC should be getting less than 5%. Those who sit. So education, the transformation, and the has to be addressed in order to deal with this. And that is more of a medium term, but we could break that in one cycle through the investment in early childhood and primary schools to ensure. And the reallocation of funds is not that you need to spend more, it's an allocation of funds. And where do you put the focus? You put the focus on math, you put the focus on English, you put the focus on ensuring that our children are literate. And also, you put the focus on the schools that need the greatest help. So where resources should go is resources should go to the schools that have the lowest performance, because those schools are taking in students that have the lowest abilities. So how do you allocate funding? Therefore, we really need to revisit how we do allocation of funding. You need to invest in the schools, and so that you can get better results out of the schools that need the greatest help. Right?
Right, thank you very much. So we now have a person online. I will take that one.
then we'll close it to the last question. So the question is from the Duncan, how does the BOG, and this is following up on the last point that was made by Donovan Wigman. How does the BOG fix the transmission mechanism in an environment where banks have little incentive to compete for consumer deposits?
Right. And the Bank of Jamaica has been, and I think the governor has spoken to it, it's called deposit, the portability of a fund, right? What has happened is that there's a concentration of deposit accounts in structural in maybe a few financial institutions. And therefore, those concentration of deposits and cheap deposits in these financial institutions do give them that reduces competition. So a financial institution that does not have that emerging financial institution, or one that has not been around for 150 years or 130 years, right, may not have that composition in their deposit base that allows them to compete in terms of lending rates, in terms of delivery of service at times, because their cost of funds are much higher than some financial institutions that have been around for a long time. So the ease of moving your account around as a depositor, where you don't have to go into the financial institution and you have to and they ask you for every living detail about yourself to be able to go and open another account elsewhere. It's that you can do. You can just go, and probably go online and move your account to another financial institution where you get more attractive rates. But right now there's a structural, and then the BOJ has spoken to it. There's a structural deficit in how deposits are concentrated across the country.
Go ahead and take our last question.
Sure, my last question is regarding Finance Minister of Financial Clark. He is about to head to the IMF. It's a two-part question. So one, are there things you think Dr. Clark should address before he goes at the end of October? That's one. And what are they? And two, what are your expectations of whoever will become the new Finance Minister at the end of October?
Right. Well, what we know for sure is that we need our interim fiscal, based on all our observations of the economy, based on the fact that growth rate is lower than projected. We expect an updated fiscal policy paper with new assumptions about where we see the economy over the next year and into the medium term, with those assumptions that giving the fiscal policy paper. We would expect that we get a supplemental budget. We would expect that the Minister of Finance will close out on the securitization of receivables. We will expect that the Minister of Finance will close out any outstanding public sector compensation negotiations for the wage agreement, which actually is completed in this fiscal year, right? So we expect for this to happen. We expect that we will get direction through the interim fiscal policy paper from the Minister of Finance around the direction of the economy. And we expect that the fiscal commission, which is going to be very important, to be in place by January or the first quarter of 2025. Okay? So those are some of the expectations. Now, for the new Minister of Finance that will step into that role, I believe the institutional architecture with an independent central bank, the fiscal commission, the public sector rationalization being in place in terms of the compensation structure, the next round of business for the new finance minister is performance management and increasing productivity of the public sector. This has been promised. This probably should have went in tandem with the compensation restructuring. That there was performance management, what it did, and it was promised on the heels of public sector compensation, which has caused Jamaica significantly in terms of the increase of compensation to the public sector. It increased by over $100 billion in 2 years. The increase in wages and salaries to the public sector. We need some performance management now. We need to see true transformation of the public sector. The next Minister of Finance will know how to take it.
Thank you very much. Excellent questions. Thank you so much for actually at the end of our press briefing. I want to thank everybody who was in and who stayed to the end. I think majority of the persons online actually remained until the end. So thank you again, and I will just give Mr. Duncan the opportunity to final words. And we close.
Okay, well, thanks again, everyone. Thanks for coming online. And we need to keep this vigorous debate going on around our country. We need to know that as citizens of Jamaica, we have to understand our economy, and we have to understand what are the moving parts, because it impacts our day-to-day lives. That fiscal envelope that the government of Jamaica has, which has, the people of Jamaica have sacrificed for us to get here, where we have a level of macroeconomic stability, along with and created fiscal space. That fiscal space now needs to be the government of Jamaica now needs to look at, and after time to speak to it, look at how we allocate and effect resources to the most vulnerable in our country, how we really transform the lives of our average citizen in Jamaica through education, through health, through community development. We need to ensure that people of Jamaica see the benefits of macroeconomic stability and the fiscal space that have been created with great sacrifice.
Thank you very much, and do have a good day, everyone.
Yeah.
We will be emailing all the relevant documents to join the efforts.